In the modern world, where access to information is instantaneous, one would think that understanding the truth should be easier than ever. Yet, reality itself seems to be shifting, and people are more uncertain about the past than ever before. This confusion is often linked to a strange phenomenon called the Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember events differently from how they actually occurred. While it seems like a harmless quirk of memory, some have found a way to exploit this effect for political gain, particularly in right-wing circles, where it's used to subtly manipulate perceptions and control narratives. This manipulation doesn't involve blatant falsehoods. Instead, it revolves around small but significant adjustments to how people remember history. Politicians and pundits on the right ask questions that seem innocent. Was that law passed in 2010 or 2008? Didn't society always value traditional family structures over modern alternatives? Wasn't that political leader always tough on crime? These questions plant seeds of doubt, making people second-guess what they once knew. Over time, they start to internalize these altered memories, especially when they align with their current beliefs. What makes this strategy particularly effective is the erosion of access to primary sources. In a world where the internet holds vast amounts of information, you'd expect people to easily verify facts. But reality is more complicated. Legal documents, academic papers, and historical records are often locked behind paywalls or hidden in obscure databases. To access them requires time, expertise, and resources that most people simply don't have. Even those willing to dive into primary sources often find themselves bogged down in jargon or complex language that obscures the truth. This lack of accessibility is crucial to the success of political manipulation. Most people rely on secondary sources like news articles or opinion pieces to understand the past. These sources are often slanted or incomplete, and when political figures subtly distort history, it becomes harder for people to recognize the manipulation. They begin to accept the altered narrative as truth, especially when it plays into their desire for a simpler, more nostalgic view of the past. Right-wing political figures have mastered this art. They don't deny facts outright. They reshape them to fit their agenda. They present a version of history where conservative values were always the backbone of society, where progressive policies are portrayed as dangerous experiments, and where America's greatness is tied to a mythical, untainted past. It's a narrative that feels familiar, comforting even, to those who long for a return to what they believe was a better time. For many, this manipulated version of history becomes more believable than the messy, complex reality of the past. When someone tries to present the actual facts, perhaps a historian or a journalist, they're met with a powerful response. That's not how I remember it. This is where the Mandela effect truly comes into play. It's not about completely rewriting history, but about bending it just enough so that the new version feels right, even if it's false. People start to question their own memories and, eventually, align with the politically convenient narrative because it feels like what they've always known. This subtle form of gaslighting creates a fog of uncertainty. When people doubt their own memories and can't easily access the truth, they become vulnerable to manipulation. Right-wing figures exploit this vulnerability by reinforcing the altered version of history through repetition, using media channels and social networks to amplify their message. The more people hear these narratives, the more they believe them, until the distorted past becomes their accepted reality. What's even more dangerous is how this manipulation undermines trust in the foundations of knowledge. People no longer trust academics, historians, or journalists to tell them the truth. Instead, they turn to political figures who offer them a simpler, more digestible version of events, one that conveniently supports their current views. The very idea of objective truth becomes suspect, and reality itself starts to fragment. In this environment, political leaders wield the Mandela effect as a subtle but powerful tool. They don't have to convince people to reject reality outright. All they need to do is create enough doubt, enough confusion, that people start to question what they know. Over time, this strategy erodes the distinction between fact and fiction. People begin to see the past as a malleable thing, something that can be shaped to suit the needs of the present. This is how right-wing politics exploits the Mandela effect. Not by erasing the past, but by distorting it just enough to control the present. It taps into people's desire for a clear, nostalgic narrative, one that explains away the complexities of the modern world and places blame on those who challenge the status quo. The past becomes a tool to justify current policies, and the more people accept this altered version of history, the easier it becomes to manipulate their perceptions of today's issues. In the end, the greatest danger lies in the slow erosion of truth itself. When people can no longer trust their memories or access the primary sources that could correct these distortions, they become prisoners of the narratives fed to them. And when those narratives are shaped by political forces with a vested interest in controlling reality, the very concept of truth is at risk. This is the subtle power of the Mandela effect in politics, a quiet but insidious war on reality, where the most effective lie is the one that feels like it's always been true.